going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome back to the channel. And today, I'm sorry if you're not an Eagles fan. This is just another stage of me trying to cope with my team kind of being a dumpster fire for the now. And that is Philadelphia. Obviously, they've traded down to pick 12. Jamar Chase sweepstakes are over. I guess there was reports they really wanted Zach Wilson from BYU. That would have been awesome. But now we're here at 12. I commonly have been getting asked, C4, who would you be excited for Philly to potentially get at pick 12? So that's going to be today's video. I'm going to go through 10 targets that I think, if they were available to the Eagles, be it I'm a fan of that player, be it maybe I'm not the biggest fan, but I can see how well they would fit in with our brand new offense or brand new defensive scheme, I will list them here. I also have a couple honorable mentions that we start. There are two players, though, that you may be surprised that don't see make my list, because I didn't want to just put everybody that could potentially be there at 12. I decided I put two guys in my top 10 that might not be there, and I eliminated two guys that might not be there just so it's not, four players that are really unrealistic to have all of them as an available option at pick 12. So two guys you're not going to see on the list. One is Kyle Pitts. If you do a couple different of those mock draft machines, he might be available there 1 in 4 times at 12. If he is still there at 12, absolutely go get Kyle Pitts. Patrick Surtain's the other one. I just think there's no way Surtain makes it past the Dallas Cowboys. But if not, I still think he's the top corner for me in this year's class. It would be an excellent start on the opposing side of Darius Slay. But I just figured we'll trim down a little bit of the guys that might not realistically still be there at 12. So that's why they're not on list. Now, before we get into the top 10, I do have honorable mentions. Now, this is not some of these players as well. I'm not going to argue or get into an argument that are they worth the 12th pick in the draft? These are just, especially for these honorable mentions, guys that if we ended up pulling a Howie Roseman and being like, wow, that guy, 12's a little rich for him, I'd still be okay with it because I'm a big fan of the player. So at wide receiver, I have Rondale Moore from Purdue, who I think would be excellent for Philadelphia. He'd be a guy I absolutely would target in the second round, maybe even trade up in the second round if he does slip past. Looking at the back end of the draft, probably Green Bay. I think he'd be a perfect utility piece for Nick Sirianni's offense. And if we just said screw it and we evaluated him and he's the best fit for us at 12, I'd be okay with it. He's electrifying. Kadarius Toney, maybe a little bit of Gator bias there because 12's a little rich for Kadarius Toney, but I do think he'll be special. Same with Terrace Marshall Jr., the wide receiver from LSU. Someone actually tweeted me about this. How fitting would it be if Philadelphia misses on Justin Jefferson, trades out of the way to get Jamar Chase, and then we get the third option from LSU. But maybe that's a credit to how good these guys were at LSU, because I think Terrace Marshall would be an excellent X-wide receiver for Philadelphia, and that's kind of a spot right now when you look at the depth chart. We have Fulham penciled in there, and hopefully we can get that Fulham back that we saw for 2-3 weeks last season. But that X is a really, really weak spot for the Philadelphia Eagles right now at the wide receiver room, and Marshall would fill that need. I got Caleb Farley at corner. Only reason why he didn't make the list is, man, that injury. I think for me, right now, he is my third corner. I think he's absolutely a fringe top 15 pick. Would be a great value for Philadelphia. The back injury, Sidney Jones is why I didn't have Caleb Farley making this list. Because back injuries, it's one of those things where you've never heard anybody in your personal life be like, man, I had that back injury, but now I'm good. Back injury is a scary injury to have. And more so the reason why I didn't make the list is I don't want to rehash the Sidney Jones saga, where Philadelphia gets a first-round corner, they falls to him, and then he just can't get healthy, can't figure it out. But ultimately, I still would if Farley passes all the medicals. If we got him at 12, I'll be very excited about that. I have at defensive tackle, Davion Nixon. I think 12's a little rich for his blood. He's my defensive tackle too, but I do think that everything I saw him at Iowa last year, utterly dominant. Only 1 year really as a starter, as productive, but I think he'd be, right now, Philadelphia, if we're looking for defensive tackles, it's going to be more so heirs to Fletcher Cox. Fletcher Cox, expensive cap hit if Philly's going into a rebuild. I don't know how much longer Fletcher's going to be on this roster, and I think Nixon has the tools to be his heir, and he would start this year as D-tackle 3 and work his way up. And last but not least, Baron Browning. Saw the Ohio State 40-yard dash times 40 is a 40. You're not going to overinflate it too much, but Baron Browning is very intriguing as an outside linebacker candidate. I mean, anytime I talk about a linebacker at 12, it's almost like I'm just speaking to nobody because there's almost a 0% chance Philly gets it. But for and for how I'm making my video, I'm talking about guys that can make immediate playmaking ability and an immediate impact at 12. And Baron Browning looks real good. I mean, you might as well also throw in Jabril Cox here because I've been such a fan of Jabril Cox, even though I think he's a guy I would like to see Philly third round, second round, somewhere in that range. If Howie Roseman pulled the smartest guy in the room and got a Baron Browning or a Jabril Cox, because we desperately need a linebacker. I think both those guys would be fit. So we're about 5 minutes in. Let's get into the slideshow. So at number 10 on our list, we're going to start with Rashod Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota, 6'1", 210 pounds. This is going to be the only time we say it, but the pro day numbers that we are getting this year, I guess we'll just say it's going to be about the funnest and fastest Madden rookie class ever when Madden 22 drops. As Rashod Bateman at his XOS combine ran a 4.37, 4.39, and out of all the players that we're going to talk about on this list, it's probably the one that like doesn't line up the most to the tape that I saw. But I've been a fan of Rashod Bateman ever since Tyler Johnson's hype train kind of started a little bit last year at Minnesota. Everyone thought Tyler Johnson was kind of the better of the two beginning of last year at Minnesota. I was like, man, Bateman has impressed me way more every single time I watch them play than Tyler Johnson. Johnson slipped in the draft and was like a solid role player last year for the Bucs, but Bateman is a legitimate first-round caliber wide receiver. Around 2,400 yards and 19 touchdowns in his career at Minnesota. I think the biggest thing for him that kind of is a stark contrast to what we have in Philadelphia right now is his separation is tracking. Right now for Philadelphia, we don't have any wide receivers that can consistently get separation, and we have wide receivers that when they finally do get open, they struggle to track the football. Jalen Rager. So what Rashod Bateman brings is, hey, hell, if that 4.37 is legit, and he was just running with weighted pads on or something like that at Minnesota, he's going to make it that much easier to get separation because right now, whatever speed he was having, which I kind of had it more so around 4.5, like a legit 4.5 speed, which is more than enough speed in today's NFL, but he can get separation fairly easy, but his tracking is what is really, really impressive. This guy finds some separation downfield and has a chance to make the play on the ball. He's going to make it. He has great adjustment to his body. He's a natural catcher with the ball. And also his route running is very, very solid. There is not a lot of stiffness, not a lot of lost motion when he is coming in and out of his breaks. And I think that from a intermediate standpoint is exactly what we need. And from a deep threat standpoint, well, and you think of a deep threat as an absolute burner. Alshon Jeffrey was like kind of a deep threat for the Philadelphia Eagles from the standpoint of bigger-bodied guy on the outside, can stretch the field and make big-time plays, 15, 20-some yards down the field. Those are just plays that have been non-existent for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think Bateman can be that guy. I think he's a starting X-wide receiver for us. My pro comparison for him is Michael Gallup, and that may not sound great because I'm comparing him to the third wide receiver on the Dallas Cowboys, but Michael Gallup has been anything but the starter for Dallas, and it's in back-to-back years he's been like a legitimate 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL. And when was the last time Philadelphia Eagles had a 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL? I honestly could not tell you off the top of my head. Deshaun? Maybe? I don't think Alshon got 1,000. I literally could not tell you. So that is good and an upgrade for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's why I have Rashod Bateman at 10. At number 9, it's a typical Philadelphia Eagle pick that we need to be prepared for them to make because I cannot recall the last time Philadelphia drafted a player that we expected to play and contribute right away as a rookie. And that's kind of the excitement of pick 6 was like, there's no way we draft someone that's not going to be able to contribute. Now that you move back down to 12, which is a range that is not unforeseen territory for Philly to draft players in, you're like, okay, now we need to start to be open-minded that it is a true rebuild, and we could very well be looking for players that are going to be able to contribute 2022, 2023. Enter the local Philly kid, Christian Barmore, 6'5", 310 pounds, only really a one-year starter for Alabama, 15 TFLs and 10 sacks, so great production and limited reps. And when you look at him, I'm just going to go right down to the bottom there with his fit. I think he's going to be defensive tackle 3 and be long-term the heir to Fletcher Cox as the beast on this defensive line. I think right now, obviously, you're going to get a lot of Fletcher Cox, a lot of Javon Hargraves. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of rotation the defensive line has now without really Jim Schwartz's unique rotation where everyone was in, everyone was coming out, constantly shuffling the units. I don't think it's going to be as extreme, but Barmore is going to fill a role right away of what Malik Jackson was supposed to be for the Philadelphia Eagles. Because with Barmore, you're getting a guy with a filthy swim move and getting a guy that has immediate interior pass rush ability that will be able to come in, substitute in for Hargrave, who you might want out there on rundowns, or Fletcher Cox, who you want out there, period. And he's going to be able to give you that rotational edge rusher already as a rookie that you're going to be able to rely on. And I wouldn't be shocked if you see Barmore chipping in with 7, 8 sacks, something like that, 6, 7, 8 sacks as a rotational guy, and a very, very high ceiling. He has a chance to be the type of playmaker that I don't want to put my comp is Mo Wilkerson, and I think that that's pretty fair because Barmore right now is kind of scheme fluid. I think a lot of teams will view him as a defensive tackle, and other teams will view him as a 3-4 defensive end, and that was kind of the case with Mo Wilkerson. And Mo Wilkerson was a guy with the Jets at his peak, was always hovering around double-digit sacks. But I think for Barmore and why he fits Philadelphia is that limited playing time as an Alabama Crimson Tide player. So the high ceiling, he'd be coming to Philadelphia as a defensive tackle 3. He gets drafted to a lot of other teams. He's going to be thrown into the wolves right away, and that might be the best way to hone into his ceiling and help him reach his potential. Could be too much at once. But he comes to Philadelphia, he's not going to have too much on his plate, can kind of work his way in as a defensive tackle 3, and then as Philadelphia moves on, and most likely Fletcher Cox moves on, it's not just going to be like, oh, we got Javon Hargrave and Hassan Ridgeway as our defensive tackle. So it's another forward-thinking move that would be kind of annoying, personally, for someone that actually wants to watch and enjoy somehow, some way, 2021 Philadelphia Eagles football. But Christian Barmore does make a lot of sense. It's a Howie Roseman pick. And, when you watch him play, when you see flashes, I'm not going to make this comparison, but I just watched a lot of Jerome Brown of those late 80s Eagles defense. And Barmore, to me, seems like he could be that type of player with a ceiling. But I'm not making that my pro comp. But as it relates to Philly, could be something special like that. And you look at the RAS score is good. He's elite. 8.23 is great for a defensive lineman. The 40 and the split, very explosive. Exactly the type of playmaker you'd want for a guy that's going to be pigeonholed as an interior rusher early on. Number 8 on the list is Greg Newsom II. Now, if we're just talking about straight corners, we already talked about the top, what I thought of Caleb Farley. I think Caleb Farley's a better corner than Newsom right now. I'm just absolutely terrified with the medical for Caleb Farley, and because I don't know if Philly's going to pass him, if Philly passes his medical and say, yeah, he's good to go, we're happy with it, then, I don't think Greg Newsom's making this list. But for what we know, what's tangible, I'm throwing him in here as number 8. 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, out of Northwestern in 3 years as a predominant starter. 71 tackles, only 1 interception, so that could be something to key in on. But 20 pass breakups. He has experience in zone. You're looking at all these schemes and all this stuff. That's something you need to value when it comes to a corner player. But I think the top end corners, for the most part, as long as they don't, they're not a liability when it comes to tackling, they're scheme transcendent. I think Patrick Surtain can play man or zone. I think Caleb Farley can play man or zone. I think J.C. Horn can play man or zone, but Greg Newsom is a guy where you start to go into I think zone first type playmaker, and that's exactly what we're going to be running here in Philadelphia. He does not have elite agility. When you look at his RAS, we'll call it RAS. Everything is good outside of his agility, but he can compensate for not great agility and not great pop with his footwork. Very, very good footwork. You got to remember Jeff Okudah last year at Ohio State. His footwork was outstanding. I'm not saying Greg Newsom's on that level, but for a guy that when you see the testing numbers like agility, that's a little bit lower than you want it to be, well, it's like, all right, well, that's why you're kind of starting to see him tread towards more of a zone corner, and his footwork helps him out a lot, get him out of trouble in situations where that lower agility could punish other players that didn't have a similar level of footwork. And he has ideal length for the outside spot. Nice, long, lengthy corner. I think it's fit for the Philadelphia Eagles is corner 2. The pro comp is we're going to go with Dane Brugler from The Athletic. I couldn't really come up with one that jumped to mind. And he went with Kyle Fuller, and a lot of Eagle fans were jumping at the bit to get Kyle Fuller when he got released from the Chicago Bears. A lot of Eagle fans were chomping at the bit for Kyle Fuller when there's rumors he could be traded from the Chicago Bears. I think Newsom would be a great get for the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe little too rich at 12 if we're trying to find players that are impacts, that scheme fit, and value. You may be lacking a little bit on the value at pick 12, but we desperately need a corner, and Newsom would fit the bill. Pick 7, we're going to go with Zack Collins, the linebacker from Tulsa, 6'4", 260 pounds. In his career at Tulsa, 236 tackles, 25 TFLs, 7.5 sacks, 5 interceptions. What he brings is elite size. I think he's one of the best cover linebackers in this class, and he would instantly be the best cover linebacker on the Philadelphia Eagles. But at 6'4", 260, there is a potential, even though some scouts are saying that he probably could slim down to 245, 250, maybe 260 is a little bit high. He has upside as a pass rusher too, because the way that he utilizes his hands, his mentality, and his aggressiveness, kind of similar to how Philly used Alex Singleton a little bit. Alex Singleton, when he would be blitzed last year in Jim Schwartz's defense, he was pretty goddamn effective. And I feel like Zack Collins has that upside. Concern for him, I'm going to be interested to see, especially with all these generous pro day testing numbers, just how good of an athlete is Zack Collins. And as of me recording this video, there's been no record there. He's one of those guys that might surprise you good, might surprise you for the worst. I don't quite know right now, so that's why we're putting him here in that purgatory on my list at 7, because either way, he's an immediate upgrade for Philadelphia at linebacker. I think he'd be the starting will, so you could put Alex Singleton to be the Sam, and then for The Mike, Davion Taylor, maybe? I'm not exactly sure. You'd have to figure that out, but I do think he'd be the starting. Well, maybe they could view him as a Mike. Either way, my pro comp for him is Benardrick McKinney, who's been a really solid linebacker for the Houston Texans, who bought great sizes, recently got traded to the Miami Dolphins. But I think, hey, Benardrick McKinney would be an awesome upgrade for the Philadelphia Eagles at the linebacking core. But again, for Zack Collins, really interested to see what his testing numbers are going to be. Also, will be interesting to see how much Philly finally starts to value the linebacker position. If any of these guys that we're about to talk about in this video have a shot at getting picked at 12, because it's historically not a position that Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles value. But literally, if you want to like watch exciting linebacker tape, there was multiple games where Zack Collins from the linebacker spot won games for Tulsa. Like, I haven't seen a linebacker with that amount of impact on their team success since like fake girlfriend having Manti Te'o when he was like a legitimate Heisman contender with Notre Dame. Number 6 for the Eagles, we're staying at linebacker, and it is going to be Micah Parsons. He's one of 2 players that I think might not be there at 12 that I decided to include on my list, just because, I mean, there are some reports that there's off the field maturity issues, stuff like that. Obviously, as someone that, you know, doesn't have interviews with the guy, I can't comment other than what I've seen and read about. But Micah Parsons, 6'3", 245 pounds, out of Penn State, almost 200 tackles in his career, 19 TFLs, 6.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. He is an elite athlete. We're going to put his RAS score in here, 9.6. The broad, the jump, the explosive, the speed, the agility ain't that bad. The shuttle, you like to see a little bit better, but the 3-cone is very good. But 4.36, even if you like, you know, making it maybe more combine-y, and like he's 4.46. 4.46? I mean, we're used to seeing these fringe 6 feet tall, 230, 225 type linebackers run 4.36. You know, the Devin Bushes, the Devin Whites type. This guy's like a legitimate full-size upgraded, and he still brings that level of athleticism. His pursuit is very good. He came to Penn State as a defensive end, so he definitely still provides a lot of upside as a pass rusher. So that if you believe in the pass rushing ability, he's going to be more. You want him on the outside as a will. I think for Philadelphia, they could also view him as a starting Mike because of the pursuit, because of the athleticism, because of the side-to-side line. And me, for my pro comp, is Leighton Vander Esch, a linebacker that once upon a time I desperately wanted to come to the Philadelphia Eagles. And unfortunately, he didn't fall to us, and the Dallas Cowboys selected him. But I think Micah Parsons would be an unreal upgrade for the Philadelphia Eagles on the defensive side of the ball. But again, like Zack Collins, just how much are the Philadelphia Eagles going to change their approach on how they value positional players? And will they finally invest a big pick in a linebacker? It remains to be seen, but Micah Parsons would be unreal in Philadelphia. And we're going to finish up with the last linebacker, just because I think he's like a perfect fit for the Philadelphia Eagles defense, and that's JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. Size is wrong. I did not hit that, but I've already re-recorded this video like 10 times. He's like 6'1". I'll tell you that right now. He's 6'2", 215 pounds. Not 6'3", 245. But when you look at JOK, 142 tackles, 24.5 TFL, 7 sacks in only 2 years at Notre Dame. He's an elite athlete, still no testing numbers, but I'll be shocked if he's not running low 4.4s and the explosion and the broad and the jump and all that stuff. Like, if we're just going to be, because we've been referring to the RAS scores, I'd be shocked if he's anything lower than a 9. So he is an elite athlete for sure. He has safety-like cover skills because he's kind of a safety, kind of, not really, but kind of for the most part. He's an absolute tone setter for the run. For a guy that's 215 pounds, you don't expect them. Those are the kind of guys that like you give up a little bit. You gain in coverage, but you lose a little bit in terms of run game. And while, yeah, technique and stuff like that is going to have to trump because there are certain size limitations, especially making that jump from college to the pros, he is a heat-seeking missile. He might not be the most reliable and consistent tackler in the run when you want him sticking in the box, but when he gets a guy, he's going to lay a lick and going to make him think twice about running it up his lane. I think the fit for the Philadelphia Eagles, he'd be the starting will linebacker. My pro comp for him is a more athletic Darius Leonard. Darius Leonard was a vital part of the Indianapolis Colts defense. And unless Philadelphia sees something that we don't on Davion Taylor, we do not have a linebacker that fits that Darius Leonard mold. So maybe, just maybe, man, if JOK was 6'3", 245, he'd be Isaiah Simmons 2.0. But for Philadelphia at 6'2", 215, kind of fits similar size to Darius Leonard. Darius Leonard's come out and reported that he's, pretty goddamn undersized for the most part. But point being, we need that. Darius Leonard was immensely important, and I've seen enough Colt fans too, because the perception on Darius Leonard is either you're the football hipster and you're like, well, he's not very good, look at all the PFF stats, or you look at the box score and you're like, this guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer when all is said and done. But most Colt fans understand that, like, Darius Leonard might not be nearly as successful in any other scheme. He's very good for what the Colts are running. And I feel like that is coming to Philadelphia, and you look at our roster and bearing, something that we just don't quite see in Davion Taylor. We do not have that linebacker. So JOK could be enough if Gaten has enough swing with Howie Roseman. If he's still on the board there at 12, which I think there's a really good shot that he could be, that could be the billing and the pick and the guy for the Philadelphia Eagles, JOK, and I'd be here for it. Number 4 for the Philadelphia Eagles, we have Jalen Phillips, defensive end from the U. As you look at it, 6'5", 265 pounds, 1 year at Miami, transferred from UCLA after he kind of retired, but in Miami at 1 year, 15.5 TFLs, 8 sacks, and an interception. He wins with technique, which is why I'm going to say that before. Like, when watching him, he was kind of a question mark. The Miami's Pro Day was 2 days ago, and I was, like, looking through my little report that I'm kind of writing up here on Jalen Phillips. I was like, man, his technique is good, and he's, like, one of those guys that, like, you can see is a high-tier edge rusher. And an issue with a lot of high-tier edge rushers is they don't want to hold their assignments. They don't want to really contribute against the run because they want the sacks. But Jalen Phillips, he's good at everything. He's a very well-rounded defensive end that handles his run responsibilities very well. He can set an edge. And then we saw the testing numbers. A 9.9 RAS, elite in almost goddamn everything. Outside of his bench press, where, again, a lot of these players, once they make that jump to the NFL, they get on those pro-level strength and conditioning programs, they're going to get stronger. But everything about Jalen Phillips confirmed to me that he was defensive end in this class. And it's not an elite edge rushing class by any means, but he is a bona fide first rounder. And this pick here kind of fits the mold like we're talking about with Barmore, where Philadelphia is thinking for 2022 and beyond. And Jalen Phillips would come into Philadelphia, be defensive end 3, probably heavy rotation. I mean, he'd probably be a guy. I don't think it's fair to assume that Josh Sweat has outright won the other defensive end spot opposed from Brandon Graham. So hell, Jalen Phillips could even be defensive end 2. But for the most part, we're going to have some rotation there. And long term, he would be much like where Barmore was supposed to be the successful heir to Fletcher Cox. Jalen Phillips would be our premier edge rusher to succeed Brandon Graham, because there's probably not a whole lot of years of prime BG left. Pro comp for him, I mean, it's very, very difficult to give a pro comparison. Daniel Jeremiah gave Montez Sweat, and while he didn't run the 4.41 that Sweat did, in all the other categories, it was very, very similar. And now we're seeing with Montez Sweat, I mean, just on that Washington defense, man, that Washington defense is borderline elite, and Montez Sweat looks every bit of a first-round edge rusher, and we definitely could need that in Philadelphia, especially beyond 2021. Number 3 on the list, I'm going with J.C. Horn of South Carolina. 6 feet tall, 205 pounds as my number 3 player. There's already reports that Philadelphia worked him out at the Pro Day. So, where there's smoke, there's fire, and Philadelphia desperately needs another outside corner. You look at J.C. Horn, 101 tackles in his career, 7 TFLs, only 2 interceptions, so kind of like Greg Newsom. The interception numbers, you'd like to see a lot more production there. 23 pass breakups. But for J.C. Horn, again, pop up the RAS, elite athlete, 9.99, one of the highest RAS scores I've ever seen. You're getting elite length. You're getting a guy that's very strong with his 19 on the bench, explosive. The speed is everything that you want. We didn't get the agility, which is something that's interesting, but his footwork for me, again, like if you don't know the exact agility testing, just watch their footwork. Are they clumsy? Are they smooth? And he's a goddamn smooth outside corner. And he's alpha, very aggressive, maybe sometimes too aggressive. You look at any scouting report, you look at any South Carolina game. I'll be honest with you. I watch South Carolina's tape to watch Israel Mukuamu. I think I really do like Israel Mukuamu, but more and more I watched, I was like, God damn, number 7 keeps making plays. And he's a lot more aggressive. So I think with J.C. Horn, ski versatile, probably best suited to be a man corner, but I think his IQ, his football knowledge, his ability to diagnose plays, and his tackling ability suits very well into a zone. And I do think that, seeing everything I've seen so far, which is very limited of Jonathan Gannon, I think J.C. Horn absolutely is going to be a guy he pounds the table for at pick 12 for Philadelphia to get. And I'm on board with it, man. Dane Brugler on The Athletic compared him to Aqib Talib. Again, yeah, sure. Aqib Talib, hey, peak Aqib Talib was an absolute ball hawk. It wasn't the exact comp I got. I didn't really get an immediate comp looking at J.C. Horn. Maybe... For me, again, I'll throw pro comps for guys that are paid scouts. For me, a little bit of Jair Alexander. A little bit of that. Maybe. If I'm trending that towards someone that's currently in the NFL. A little bit of that. A little bit feistier, maybe not as comfortable in coverage, holding up downfield, but I do like J.C. Horn, and if he's the guy that we get at 12, I'd be okay with it. Because we desperately need an outside corner to play opposed Darius Slay this year and for the years coming. And while you never really ideally want to have a rookie corner starting outside, because when was the last time a rookie corner actually looked good as a rookie starting in the NFL? I think J.C. Horn's mentality, the fact that he's such an alpha, I think he could handle the pressure of being a starting outside corner as a rookie. Number 2 on the list, we're going with Devante Smith, 6'1", 175 pounds, out of Alabama. The Heisman Trophy winner, finished his Alabama career with 235 catches, almost 3,000 receiving yards, and 46 touchdowns. There's a legitimate claim that he has the best hands in this class. I don't know if I can say for sure. I don't know if I can give outright anybody that title. But if you're trying to just break down what wide receivers are best at what, for hands, I don't know if I can make an argument that anyone has better hands than Devante Smith. He can play every spot that you could ask a wide receiver. He can be the X, he can be the Y, he can be the Z. He's an absolute technician with everything he does. He's a hands catcher, doesn't use his body, his route running is crisp, picks up on it feels like, I don't know, I'm not as expert of a scout as it feels like he picks up steam as the game goes on. It's almost like he just picks up on tendencies of defensive backs. So I'm going to credit that to a very high football IQ, and I think for the fit for the Philadelphia Eagles, he'd be the starting X. A lot of people are saying he's more of a Z. Could be more. I think for Philly at 6'1", even though he has side concerns, he'd be a guy that you'd want to be your wide receiver 1. Am I pro comp for him? I mean, I have talked and discussed maybe about Marvin Harrison-esque, because from a frame standpoint, that's the most similar. But Marvin Harrison's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that's a stretch to really unfair to give that comp to a lot of these guys. I'm going to go more so with Calvin Ridley. Fits the Alabama mold from a scheme style standpoint. Very, very similar. I think maybe a little bit more juice for Ridley. He was like low 4.4s. But ultimately, Devante Smith would be wide receiver 1 for Philadelphia. And anytime you have a chance to get the best wide receiver for your team at pick 12 in the draft, that is something that is just too good to pass up on. And at number 1, kind of in line with Micah Parsons as players that might not be there at 12 still, I'm going with Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver from Alabama, 5'10", 185 pounds in his career, over 100 catches, 2,000 yards, and 17 touchdowns. I think he's the best pure deep threat receiver in this year's draft class. He's elite once he catches the ball. Yards after the catch are ridiculous for this playmaker. He separates with ease. Going back to what is the biggest issue with the Philadelphia Eagles is that we don't have guys that can get off and get separation and make plays downfield, and that's exactly what you're getting in Jaylen Waddle. I have talked before, though, that I do feel like Philadelphia, if they have yet to give up on Jalen Reagor, they're both going to be, if they hit their ceiling, like the same type of guy. You want them to be the Z. You want them just to be able to obviously utilize their speed, but also utilize them in different ways versus just straight up running wide receiver routes. You want them to come in motion. You want them to get passes out the backfield. You want them to take different hands off out of the backfield potentially. So I do feel like there's a risk of having too much of a good thing with Philadelphia, but I haven't seen enough out of Jalen Reagor to say that if Jaylen Waddle is there at pick 12, we can't pull the trigger on him because, we have Jalen Reagor. You could find ways to incorporate both Jaylen Waddle and Jalen Reagor, even if that's putting Waddle in the slot and pending a fringe top 10 pick on a slot wide receiver. That could be a tough sell, but not when you're Philadelphia and you've had zero wide receiver play for like 3-4 years now. My pro comp for him, a lot of people are comparing him to Tyreek Hill, and again, much like the people that are comparing Devante Smith to Marvin Harrison, that's just not a fair comp to make. There is only one Tyreek Hill. So I'm thinking more so, give me peak T.Y. Hilton. Give me a guy that is sneaky good route runner, even though he's clearly a deep threat, can make guys look dumb in space, and he gets separation with these. I like the T.Y. Hilton comp, even though the last couple of years, T.Y. Hilton has not particularly aged well. I mean, there's been suspect quarterback play with Indy, but peak T.Y. Hilton was one of the best deep threats in the NFL, a guy that was consistently getting 1,000 yards, and I think that is exactly what Jaylen Waddle can bring to the Philadelphia Eagles. So there you go, guys. Those are my top 10 targets, plus some honorable mentions for the Philadelphia Eagles at pick 12. All that's left for you guys to do in the comment section below. Let me know who you want Philly to get at pick 12. Do you like my list? Do you agree with my list? Where would you potentially change players around? Would you have a different order? All that, let me know. Look forward to hearing your guys' opinion. We'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of the Tom Savage Miami Hurricanes Dynasty in NCAA 14. But that does it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching. As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.